Good evening, everyone. How are you doing tonight? I think you can do better than that. There we go. That's what I was looking for. I am Jeff McNunn. I'm Vice President of Industry Development and Theatrical here at TIFF. Before I introduce this incredible session, I'm sure many of you know TIFF is embarking on a big, new, exciting journey by launching an official content market this September or next September. We are thrilled to be building up to that moment with events like this throughout the year. And we will be doing, obviously, more, really supporting Canadian talent, and we're really happy with our partnership here today with DGC Ontario. I will say we've cut a bit of a trailer for the market, and we're hoping to show it to you. It doesn't have the sizzle that Frankenstein does, but we did our best, so check it out. The pace of that trailer represents my stress level going into next year, but it's going to be great. Tonight, we thank you for joining us for this discussion titled The Anatomy of World, in which you'll get to step inside the making of the new Netflix adaptation of Frankenstein, directed by close friend of TIFF and Toronto fan and lover, Guillermo del Toro. As part of this session, we will hear about the nuanced details that our talented guest poured into crafting the production and visual design for global audiences to discover. As you join us today, we encourage you to reflect on the land that you are on and its history. TIFF is located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee. The territory is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We are very grateful to work on this land and to bring the work of Indigenous artists to our audiences. We are grateful for our major sponsors, RBC and Visa, as well as our government supporters, the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, and the City of Toronto. TIFF the Market is funded by the Government of Canada and supported by our major supporter, Telefilm Canada. We'd also like to thank Netflix for generously providing us with clips from the film to demonstrate the artistry of our guests' incredible work. And finally, a big thanks, as I mentioned already, to the Directors Guild of Canada, Ontario Council for being a fantastic collaborator on this event, and to welcome to all the DGC Ontario members who are with us here tonight. To say a few words, I'd like to welcome Director and DGC Ontario Chair Annie Bradley to the stage. Before I do, I just want to say a big congrats to Annie, who received the 2025 Women in Film and Television Crystal Mentorship Award earlier today.
Thank you so much. You sneaky. Sneaky. Good evening, everyone. It's so great to see you all here tonight, and I am unreasonably excited about what we're all going to experience. I guess I don't have to introduce myself because Jeff did such a great job at that, but I am a DGC director member, and I am your chair of the Directors Guild of Canada's Ontario District Council. And I humbly serve our 3,600 DGC Ontario members working in film and television production in 9 craft categories. We are tremendously honored to co-present tonight's panel, which shines a light on Ontario's remarkable talent pool of creative collaborators. And I want to take a moment to congratulate the entire Frankenstein team, some of whom are here tonight, I'm sure, on this incredible artistic and logistical achievement, and also on your well-deserved DGC Award win for Feature Film Crew of the Year. Tonight is about the powerful alchemy that happens when a filmmaker discovers and nurtures a creative family. Again and again, from Mimic to The Shape of Water, Nightmare Alley, to Frankenstein and more, Guillermo del Toro chose Ontario to craft his cinematic worlds. And just as importantly, he chose Ontario keys and crews, trusting them not only as experts in their craft, but as true partners in the elevation and execution of his vision. That kind of long-term creative commitment is at the heart of what makes his story with our membership and this community so very meaningful. So on behalf of DGC Ontario, I'd like to thank TIFF for helping us celebrate this exceptional work, and thank you all for being here to honor the people behind Del Toro's visionary film. And now, let's enjoy the conversation.
So guiding us through this conversation today, I will hand it over to Emily Gagne, a filmmaker, critic, and programmer who will be moderating this session. Emily and guests.
I'm going to welcome up our motley trio, Miles Dale, Tamara Deverell, and Dennis Berardi. Thank you guys for doing this. This is so exciting. Obviously, you know, Guillermo loves Toronto, and part of the reason that he loves it so much is because he gets to work with folks like you guys. And he's worked with all of you quite a few times. How did this project sort of differ from your other experiences with him? I mean, for one thing, you're working with Netflix, but also this is like a big, big undertaking, the world alone.
Well, there was a big ship, is one.
We're going to talk about that, don't worry.
No. I think really it was that we all knew that, you know, he had always wanted to make this film. So, you know, I've been working with him for over 15 years. Tamara, I don't want to date her, but, you know, all the way back to Mimic. And, you know, those were films, and, you know, Shape of Water and Nightmare Alley and everything, and they were beautiful films, but we knew that his whole life he wanted to make this. So when he sort of declared that it was time to do it, you know, in his life, and with Netflix, you know, being prepared to support it, and, you know, where he was as a filmmaker and a father and all those things, and the planets were aligned, it just put a lot of, you know, pressure on knowing that we really had to deliver, and that this one was the one, and really that's what made it principally different. And also it was a bigger movie. I mean, Shape of Water, you know, it was ambitious, but it was smaller. Nightmare Alley was a little bigger. This was just a huge movie in every way, in terms of, you know, what we were doing, where we were doing it, how much we were building, the aforementioned ship, going to Scotland and England, and just, you know, having a big break and doing miniatures and everything else. So, you know, logistically it was huge, but really more than anything was the kind of thing that there could be no regrets at the end. and that, you know, sort of weighed on everybody, and we knew that we all sort of had to bring our A game that way.
How did you guys feel? Like, Tamara, I know you got the ask at the Nightmare Alley, like, rap party or something. Is that true?
It was at the premiere.
At the premiere.
Guillermo leans over to me. He doesn't speak to me all night. He leans over to me and goes, Frankenstein. That's one word he said to me. And I was doing Cabinet of Curiosities at the time and was just exhausted because that actually was an extremely difficult show. And what could I say but, yes.
It's alive.
Because it's Frankenstein. I mean, who wouldn't say yes to A, to Guillermo, and B, to Frankenstein?
How about you, Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, as Miles said and Tamara said, I mean, it was something he's been born to make, right? I mean, he's been trying to, like, make it or thinking about making it since he was a kid. And it's his version of Frankenstein. I mean, he's adapted the book. I mean, he has this thing where you hear the Johnny Cash thing where he says when Johnny Cash sings Hurt, it's his version of Hurt. This was going to be his version of Frankenstein, and it's just the level of I mean, the work he put into the screenplay, and when I read it, I was just blown away, and then started to talk with Miles and Tamara about it. I mean, it was just humbling to even be considered. I actually worked on Mimic as well. I was a lowly film recording operator in the back room in dark labs, but we did film clips and with Dan Lauston as well at that time, and scanned film in and out, and had some passing time with Guillermo, and I mean, it's just been a great collaboration since then.
Yeah, obviously you guys keep returning to each other. It's like a family, kind of.
Very much so. And I think, there's such a shorthand there. I know without even asking, what Guillermo wants, what drives him visually, the architectural gestures that he wants, the circles. I'm sure, especially my team that's here, we're all aware of the circle motif. There's just a language that we have, artist to artist, which is very special.
Love that.
I think that was actually a big part of why he felt he was ready to make it too, that, we had all been together for a while, and that shorthand, and, between Lauston, Tamara, myself, Kate Hawley, Dennis, Mike Hill, it was a pretty tight group. So, sometimes when you do a film, a bunch of people are thrown together, and, it's kind of like a petri dish, and you just don't know how it's going to work out, and are those personalities going to mesh, and the chemistry of it. And I think Guillermo, amongst other things, just felt that was the perfect time with the right group in the right place, and he seized it.
Love it. You mentioned the ship. Let's roll the ship clip. And there's a lovely photo of our monster lover on set. You guys have to tell the story of how you chose where you were going to shoot this. I know this was kind of an undertaking to actually build this ship and then place it somewhere that you could actually have it work for what you needed.
We looked for a stage for a long time that would be big enough. None were existing. And so we decided, well, why not build it in the parking lot? And so, interestingly, we started building it, and a Facebook or a Twitter thing popped up, and people were talking, and someone said, "Oh, I'm so reassured that Toronto's shipbuilding industry is back." Evidently not realizing that they don't really build them on the parking lot at a film studio. So, but also reassuring us that we were doing a pretty good job with it. So yeah, we decided that, we needed access to it. We needed, to be able to light it properly with, 1,000 cranes and telehandlers, and be able to, have the kind of access. And also, if it was the weather was wrong or the lighting was wrong, we could just go inside. So we built it in the parking lot, which was not without its own complications of moving lighting poles and electrical boxes and this and that. And then, what you don't really see here is that we built the bow and the stern and the port side of the ship, but the entire starboard side, the right side, is completely open with hydraulics and a giant engineering project, 1 million pounds of steel and hydraulics and everything else, and crew access. So, it was quite the job. And once we decided to do it, which I think took about 5 months, Tamara can fill you in on the rest.
Oh my God, how long did it take us to draw? I mean, Etienne, who is here, who started drawing it. He's hiding himself. I can't remember when he started. It was like months of figuring out, what we were building, expanding it to fit Guillermo's vision. All sets get expanded a bit with Guillermo. So even though I expand it before I show him, he still adds another 10 feet. It's interesting, the decision to make it in the parking lot, we were looking at doing it at Markham Fairgrounds at one point, which we're very familiar with because we shot there in Nightmare Alley. And it would have been far, and it was a bit of a logistic nightmare to shoot it in our parking lot. We lost all our crew parking, all our tech truck parking, and somehow we made it work. What can I say about the ship? The ship was, it was a huge engineering undertaking. I think every person in the art department drew some element of the ship, right? April's nodding. April drew the steering wheel. Like at one point it just exploded, and Etienne, who was the mastermind of it, although he's a landlubber, stepped aside. He had to do the inside of the ship. And so it just became this big art department endeavor to do all the little pieces that make up the ship. There's the steering wheel and all the skylights and all now I can't remember the ship language, but what I really liked was the aspects of it that really gave me a charge were putting on the metal plates, which they did with Arctic exploration vessels, which was very Frankenstein-like. Devising a scheme, I'm looking at the picture down here, devising a way to make the icicles, which was a huge endeavor, and our scenic artists experimented with silicones and all kinds of things to make those icicles. Then, of course, Dennis augments it. And it was a hoot. When I first saw it, Dennis was sitting in front of me when I first saw the film, and when it gets pushed out at the end to the Arctic, I just grabbed Dennis's shoulder, and it was almost weeping because what a collaboration. VFX just made my dreams come true.
Well, what a way to start with the amazing masterpiece of the build. I mean, it's stunning, the build. And then put it on a gimbal. The thing went to and fro, like, what was it, 7, 8 degrees?
I think 9 degrees each way.
9 degrees to and fro. So we really built the ship, bow, port side, and stern. Really put it on a gimbal. We were in a parking lot, so that had some challenges. I mean, in terms of lines of sight, and there was a lot of dressing that had to go around, but we were generally wider than the dressing that we had. So we had, and one of the things we did once Tamara did the design and it started to come alive, we kind of put it into Unreal Engine and just gave Guillermo a bit of a walkthrough and to get a feel for it, and that really helped kind of visualize it a little bit as this beautiful ship was being built. And it just kind of, and then we started with Dan and Guillermo finding some shots in Unreal Engine. And that was really helpful, and the Arctic ice scape, the snow dressing was beautiful in the immediate surroundings. And then we were wider, there was some digital extensions there. And that was kind of like our philosophy with the digital work in general, is to always start where we could, with in-camera, practical, tactile stuff, and then kind of enhance it and build around it where we had to,
Yeah, I feel like the opening shot is all digital, right? And then it goes into the practical of the ship, and the melding of the worlds is like so beautiful. It feels very seamless. Dennis, how did you sort of go about, helping your team visualize how you wanted that horizon to look? Because it is such a magnificent part of that story, especially the start, and then the end, is that horizon shot.
Well, we took Tamara had a lot of inspirational references, and that's kind of our starting point, obviously. I remember you were showing a lot of the Shackleton stuff in the early days, and that became stuff. And then I remember we went to a scout, a bunch of us, to Alberta, and every time Guillermo would see a moody sky that he liked, he would stop the car and make me go out and shoot panos. And we did that a lot. And then he had this inspiration, I'm not sure, maybe it probably started with you, I'm sure it did, with the Grimshaw skies.
Yes, yeah.
And so we wanted these really moody skies, and we started doing 360-degree skies. Grimshaw is a brilliant English painter, and these skies with these dark, moody, kind of black clouds that are backlit by moons, and with these God rays coming through, that became kind of a bit of, the inspiration for the skies. And again, it all starts with the original photography, the design, the construction, and the photography. I did try to plug into Dan's world as much as possible, and a big part of our process is being, not hijacking anything, but supporting the performances and supporting the design and being as invisible as we could. But Dan had like pro-mist filters, like quarter pro-mist filters on everything, so everything had a bit of a glow on it, and he would show reference of how we'd want the skies, and Tamara had her vision, and we just, we're trying to unify it and support it all, as tactile as possible with our digital tools,
I want to move on to another set that was sort of very collaborative and probably like the biggest undertaking, I assume, of the production. Miles and Tamara, can you kind of talk about the location scouting in the UK and how that sort of came to influence what would become the Lab Tower?
Yeah, sure. So the first scout we went on, it was Tamara and I and Guillermo and Guy Davis, who was Guillermo's longtime concept designer, brilliant guy. And we went to Scotland and the UK, and we saw a number of really interesting locations, and we knew that we had to do it there, not only to honor, the real locations in Mary Shelley's book, because we wanted to be, careful to do that, but also because there were just so many beautiful places, and there's only Casa Loma here. So, so we went up and we found this place called the Wallace Tower, where Mel Gibson was, and it was a beautiful architecture, and that was the William Wallace Battle of Some Bridge on Some Year, and we saw this thing, and it was quite incredible, and I think that was really the inspiration. And then Guillermo also discussed, what it would be, what would Victor's location be, and he came to the idea of a water tower, and they would have access to the water, and it would have the drain that we sort of set up there. We could fall into the water. So it was all kind of really well thought out. But then, of course, it turned into, was it 8 sets?
Yes.
So
we've got
we have the exterior location at Markham Fairground, literally on the same patch of grass where
that
we
would
shot
be the base of the tower.
the base of the tower where we shot at Nightmare Alley Carnival, exact same spot. And then we had the entry foyer set, and then we had the lab set in 2 different variations, and then we had Victor's quarters, and then we had the top of the tower, and we had the top of the tower. And so it was like that was a thing of its own. And then the creatures quarters, which doubled as the freezer chamber where we saw Harlander. So that could have been like a giant miniseries of its own, just the sets for the lab, and you can take it from here.
I'm exhausted already. The Wallace Tower, like Scotland loves towers, and the Wallace Tower was one thing, but we were also looking at the Glasgow University at the vaulted ceiling. I can't remember. It's like an area in the Glasgow University, and I was like, "Oh, I love vaulted ceilings. I've always wanted to do a vaulted ceiling." So there were lots of those vaulted ceilings that we looked at, and in fact, that harkens back to Mimic. When I was working on Mimic as the art director, we looked at City Hall in Manhattan, which is vaulted ceilings that are tiled. And I reminded Guillermo of that, and he was like, yes, tiled, vaulted ceilings, let's do it. Incredibly tricky build to do that cell and to have, the supports wiled away so we could get the camera in. We actually had our team of builders devised a machine to pull away the columns so the camera could come through. It was pretty fantastic.
And rig it from the ceiling, the whole thing,
Yeah,
right?
but the whole thing was hung from the ceiling, and it had to be done in less than 3 minutes, Guillermo time. So, and then, that was one of my favorite sets. They're all my favorite, but the lab itself was just so monumental, and we actually could not find a studio big enough. We barely squeezed it in with room for Dan to light where we were, Guillermo just wanted it really big, because I think he saw Oscar doing a dance through it, and that you can see that in the film. And I still to this day I feel badly because we did this, as some of you know, and I'm looking at you, Soren. We did this grate in the floor with these giant foot-size holes. Soren is our set designer who led the lab drawings, and and Oscar, like just slightly smaller than your human foot to go in those giant grates that you see. And Oscar had to deal with those. And he actually said to me one day, thank you for the floor. It was really made me have to think about my movement in a different way. And I felt terrible, but I'm glad we did it. And Guillermo, I asked Guillermo, but I said, do you want us to change this? Should we put a mesh? He said, no, let's leave it. He'll deal with it. The same thing with the ceilings, low ceilings that we had in the captain's quarters. Guillermo was like, his head was hitting the ceilings, and Guillermo was like, no, let's leave it. He'll act it. And I was like, right,
I love the impersonations. It's good.
I love that. I love Guillermo for allowing the spaces to take a precedent over the actors, and the actors have to act in those spaces.
Nobody hit their head in the lab.
No, the lab was, yeah. Sorry, I got off the lab.
No, it's okay. I just need a second to talk about the window, which is so beautiful, but I understand that it has a direct connection to another Guillermo project that you worked on.
Yeah, a similar window was used in Crimson Peak, which I didn't work on. Tom Sanders was the amazing designer on that movie, and I can't believe that movie didn't get more accolades, because to me it's one of the most beautiful gothic, handsome movies I've ever seen. And they use the reference from Notre Dame Cathedral for that window, so it has a long history, but that's where it started, at Notre Dame.
Well, and the circles theme
And the
of the
circle
whole movie.
theme is, it's a constant, and for those of you who may have seen Nightmare Alley, we did the same thing where, the main character is always sort of featured in front of a window or with a window behind him that's a circle. And we actually, I didn't even have a conversation with Guillermo. It was just, we knew there was going to be a circle in there. He had the Medusa as a circle, so it made sense to have those two elements together.
And a lot of mirrors too, right?
Mirrors everywhere.
We can show the next photo, which will show the Medusa, just so that we have some context. There she is. Beautiful.
That's me in a budget meeting.
So many layers of scenic paint. When I look at that, we were chipping away at it, and we had it CNC cut, which means like it was cut on a machine that's computer generated, kind of, and then we had to hand carve the whole thing because it wasn't good enough, and we had to resculpt the nose and chop the nose, and it was such a big load of craftsmanship in that.
Where does she live now?
In the garbage. And she was too big to keep.
Guillermo keeps almost everything, and even that was too big for him to keep. It was like a bridge too far.
There is one that we did for a miniature that was built at Shepperton that has been kept, which is on exhibition, or will be. Somewhere.
Okay. Dennis, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, your contribution to the set, especially the explosion outside and dealing with the exterior of the tower and sort of creating that space around it and the storm and all of those elements.
Yeah, that was probably our biggest challenge from a visual effects perspective. And one of the things I just want to say in terms of working with production design and with Tamara and everyone, it's like, and Guillermo has this thing, it's like there's no departments, everybody overlaps a little bit, and that's the lovely thing about him and his process. But the tower, so we built, Tamara built obviously how much did you build at Market Crayons? The first 20 feet by?
Oh my God, the overall height was at least 2 stories.
Yeah, so we had
30. Soren, do you remember?
Do you have the drawings with you, Sean?
Yeah, pull them out, Soren. Which was great because we did these anytime you're outside in these wide establishers, when we were wide, we would extend the tower digitally. But more than that, what we did was we built a miniature of the tower, and we built a number of different miniatures. We did a 20th scale miniature of a 400-foot tower, so it was a 20-foot tower. And then we actually did a 40th scale miniature as well for what we were calling the Seinfeld shots, which were kind of like establishers, let's say. But the collaboration between Jose at the Magic Camera Company and Tamara and Brant to get and us to get every detail exactly right on that tower, and then we scanned that tower, and then did a digital double version of it, and then not only the tower but the peninsula that it sits on was kind of based on a location that called Seacliff in Scotland, which we also kind of scanned and did photo G around and did a digital version of the entire environment around it. So the tower existed as a physical set at Markham Fairgrounds. It existed as a miniature, and it existed in CG. And I think that that's really kind of the story of this film, is like, it's kind of like every discipline at the highest level. And you don't hopefully you don't really see the technique. You don't see when it's CG. You don't see when it's a miniature. It's just there, and you feel the emotion of the moment. But for the tower collapse, I mean, we charged it up with det cord. We built 2 towers. We used old school kind of forcing the perspective, where you kind of take you have to increase the frame rate and use special lensing and lots of depth of field to create the illusion that the tower isn't miniature, to aggrandize it photographically. And we set all these angles with Guillermo and Dan, did it outside so we had the proper amount of light, and blew the shit out of it, but the thing that we did that was really great is, remember, you worked on the exact silhouette that you wanted it to collapse as, and I think there was multiple versions of that, and our miniature effects guy, Jose, who's a genius, and probably Miles, probably one of 5 or 6 people in the world who can do this type of work. Probably he collapsed the tower in the exact silhouette, like blew it up and collapsed it in the exact silhouette.
It was like the silhouette we had done in the illustration.
Yeah, which was great. And then for the interior tower, because that catches on fire and explodes as well, we did a 1/6 scale version of the set. And so we scanned Tamara's set and gave all of that data to Jose, and he did a 1/6 scale miniature. And then, the fire didn't exactly scale. Fire never scales, so we stepped on the fire digitally. But the batteries, the set was reproduced at 1/6 scale beautifully by Jose, and then we also blew it up. So we just had a lot of fun blowing stuff up.
And the thing is, Jose came with his I can't remember the fellow's name, but his key scenic artist, while we were building the base of the tower and the lab, and was able to really see for himself all the scenic touches and notes and meet with our scenic artists. So that, I think, really blended everything together. It was so important, artist to artist, that they got that right. And I was amazed. You see this, you walk into this lab set and it's this big, and the Medusa's this big instead of 16 feet across, and they've just matched every little drip and every piece of aging on it.
And it gave us the foundation to, because as I said, we want it to be completely invisible. We don't want you. We certainly don't want you to see when we're doing a visual effect, and we don't want to, we just want to be integrated into the story, right, and not take it over. And so the whole thing was like, shoot it practically, enhance it, and take it over where you had to or where we have to. In the case of the tower, the fire, the water, and that kind of stuff, and the environment around ended up being mostly or all digital. But the miniatures were found, like, they were really I don't think I'd want to do it any other way,
I know the first time I saw it, and the water slide scene, as I've called it, I don't know if you call it that, but I thought that was pretty exceptional. Dennis, can you talk a little bit about that particular scene from a digital effects perspective?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the set that he's in, the holding cell set, is a genius set, and Tamara talked about how those pillars were able to come out, and the lighting, and I mean, it was just an amazing, beautiful set. Jacob was naked and has silicon appliances. Silicon doesn't like fire, and neither do humans. So we had interactive lighting that Dan set up with us, and we had flame bars at a safe distance, so we'd get the flicker on the walls. We scanned Tamara's set, and then we had a 3D version of the set digitally, and we had Dan's interactive lighting, and of course Jacob's amazing performance, playing as if he was surrounded by fire. And Guillermo wanted the fire to be a character. It comes down the stairs and chases him, and he breaks his chains in the nick of time to jump out of the chute, and that fire is digitally animated by Mr.X using kind of fluid simulations in Houdini. The moment he jumps out of the shoot, we actually shot a 1/6 scale miniature of a puppet. Remember that? With the and so we did Jacob's 6'5", and we ended up doing a puppet that's about 14 inches, and we built a scale miniature and put water down the chute and put the puppet down, pulled the puppet down, and it was really great reference. We shot it at high res, and you had these moments of physicality that Guillermo loved, and it became sort of a nice touchstone for us for animation. And then at the end, when he goes into the water, that's we did dry for wet there. So he goes out at the chute. ILM did that piece. A great company, ILM, did him coming down through the air digitally, and then we transitioned through the water into a dry for wet, which we shot on a black duvetine. We learned how to do that on Shape of Water with, lots of atmosphere and an open shutter and all the tricks with these caustic lights. And so we transitioned into a live action element out of CG, which I'm pretty proud that we were able to keep the live action element as well. So yeah, that's sort of the Cole's notes on that sequence.
And from our end, we figured out really the hard way that tiles don't go on concentric circles that are like double circles going this way and that way. So that build of the chute that you see was actually impossible. And it took a long time to actually customize all the tiles to go around it. The long chute, we built a long chute that you see the creature coming down. It was actually a stunt double. And so part of that was for real. And for that long shoot, through trial and error, because it was so difficult to make this tiled nightmare that Guillermo wanted, we actually photographed and did a digital backing of our tiled cell and used that on the base of the shoot, because you couldn't even use tile because it would hurt. It would, it was dangerous.
It was not so subtle metaphor for a birth canal, and you don't want to know what we called the set.
I think I might want to know.
Later.
I mean, in the circle of life, I feel like there's a lot of metaphor to be had. In general, I feel like what everyone really appreciates about Guillermo's films is just this mixture of fantasy and reality. And how, I guess, do you all navigate the technical needs of your roles with, this fantasy desire? Like, when do you say sort of, stop, we can't make that happen? Or does that not happen?
Never. No, I mean, he owns this genre, really. It is his, I've often said that you don't have to see the credits of a movie to know that it's a Guillermo del Toro film. You just don't. So, he's able to do that, and it feels kind of natural and fantasy all at once. And, even with Shape of Water and Nightmare Alley and this film, they're all set in the past, but they all feel very relevant to today. So, I think it's his sort of secret sauce is that he can do that and have it, be escapist enough to make you feel you're in another place, but also relevant enough to make you feel like it's yours. You really don't question that part of it because, as Dennis was saying earlier, we were talking about, you read it and it's one thing on the page, and then you shoot it and you see dailies, and then when it comes together, with everything together and the music and everything, you're like, oh my God, it's really better than you ever thought it could be, and you thought it could be pretty good. So really that tonal stuff, you just never question it. And he's also very good at articulating what he wants, and so those little nuances, they make sense. So Tamara, again, having done a few things with him and all of us, it's like, he'll say something that may not make sense on the surface, but you understand that in the great tapestry of what it is, it'll all make perfect sense later.
Yeah. How about you, Tamara? How do you sort of navigate, your desires artistically and the technicality of things? Like, for example, with the ship, it's like, I know you did a lot of research in terms of the history of what that ship would look like in the late 1800s. But then you also have to work with the gimbal and navigating different needs for technical stuff.
I mean, my biggest go-to is research and history, and I treated this as a period film. And I think that's where my partnership and collaboration with Guillermo really works, because he pushes the fantastic. He was pushing this to be operatic and theatrical, and I was grounding it in reality and history. Even like the steam engines in the lab, I had to know for myself that those would exist at the time, and that those giant battery towers that we built could have existed in some form.
We'll talk about the science of moving the movie 50 years ahead of the novel, because that was also...
Yeah, that was a big one. As soon as Guillermo decided to do that later than Mary Shelley's actual novel, it freed us up, me, who's sort of grounded in history, to work with steam engines and the start of the Industrial Revolution and that kind of thing. I don't know if that answers your question, but that is my collaboration with him. So he's constantly pushing and I'm constantly pulling, and he likes that I try and ground it in reality. He appreciates that, and I love that he pushes the fantastic, so I can go a little far-fetched in my mind and push the dynamic of those two working together.
Yeah, but it even goes to the costumes as an example. Like, he wanted, Victor to not be a scientist, but to be an artist. And the costumes, like, he's strolling around and David Bowie and Prince and Hendrix were the inspiration. So when you see him strutting around like Mick Jagger, like, that's very intentional. He's a bit of a dandy that way. So I think Guillermo said he always wanted this to be like 15%, pumped up. That's why it's a waltz in the creation scene, because it is a dance. So it's grounded in history, but it's all sort of elevated that little bit, and as Tamara says, operatic, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I mean, in general, this is like an interesting adaptation of this material, because you're adjusting the time period, but you're also, adding spaces that didn't exist, while also navigating like the pop culture legacy of Frankenstein as an entity. How did you guys individually, take Guillermo out of it? I know he's a huge part of it, but when you were working on this, how did you sort of want to make this stand out from previous iterations of Frankenstein that we've seen before?
Well, the biggest piece was obviously the inclusion of the creature's tale, and so this isn't strictly a retelling of the book, but we feel it's a more accurate retelling, faithful retelling of the book, just by virtue of that alone, by letting the creature tell his story, because none of the other 1,000 Frankenstein films have done that. So, with that in mind, that was kind of a little bit the North Star. And in fact, I mean, not many people know this, but at one point it was going to be two movies. It was going to be Victor's Tale and The Creature's Tale. But obviously, as you can see from the movie, it's sort of imbalanced. Victor's Tale, complete with young Victor, is kind of a movie, and the creature, comes in later and has less time, and then they come together. So it was just like, let's do it all, and then do the impossible post-production of cutting it down from like 5 hours to 2.5. But that was kind of the big thing that everyone glommed onto, that we realized was different about this film.
How about you guys?
My philosophy, I mean, generally I try to hold on for dear life generally, but I guess the thing I maybe want to speak to is kind of like how the film is kind of made 3 times, and every film is, in this case with Guillermo's adaptation and his screenplay, which was huge, then the prep and the filming of it, and then the editorial process of it, and he likes to work so fast, and we would shoot a scene and he would show it to us like the next morning, right? And a lot of us would go into the editing room, and so that turnaround is crazy. And then as we're starting to temp out the movie and kind of just put things in the movie, try things out for size for him, and we're moving at such a pace, so it's both a marathon and a sprint. Like, it's a daily sprint and a 2.5-year marathon. So it's so I lean on my training and work, the processes that we've established. And we had great companies. We had ILM and Mr.X and Ticket. We had over 350 artists working on it, thank God. And Stacy Dodge is here somewhere, who was our quarterback. So just kind of work the process and be ready to turn things around very quickly for him. I think that's how he likes to work. And so I find speed helps us. Like, if you're fast enough, he reacts, and then you can react back and represent. So I kind of like the versioning process is very important in my worlds, and that's how I kind of get through it,
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you have something to say? You lifted your mic.
fine.
Okay. I feel like, the lab, for example, is a great example of how, in the novel, he creates it in his apartment. But in this, you have his apartment and you have the lab. So, Tamara, how did you sort of navigate creating those two spaces? Like, they feel intrinsically linked, like they could be part of the same space, but then also not.
Oh, to me, they're very different spaces. His Edinburgh
Really?
apartment is very, very different from the lab. Not even in the same part of the world. But, what I did want to say is, when I started Frankenstein, I reread Mary Shelley's book, and to my chagrin, there is really no creation scene. And we're also used to this massive creation moment that we've seen over and over and over again. I was like, literally, where is it in the book? And I'm flipping, and it's just like, he goes to bed, and the creature's there, and the whole scene with the creature coming at the end, at the foot of his bed, is one thing that actually is in the book that hasn't been in any other movie that I've seen. So that was kind of a real nod for Guillermo. My takeaway, my approach to Frankenstein was really, I thought about 18-year-old Mary Shelley writing this, and walking through the streets of Edinburgh, which we did very early on and again, and seeing the moors of Scotland and the mist over, Loch Lomond or wherever we were, whatever that lake is, Loch Lomond. That was, to me, something that I was inspired by and trying to evoke, through the design. And it's so painterly, to me it's like I'm a frustrated painter, so when you have a whole, crew of amazing scenic artists and sculptors and builders that are, at your beck and call, you just want to use them to the utmost of their capabilities, and I think we did that.
I think we have a fair amount of folks here that actually worked on this film, and I just wanted to give them an opportunity to maybe wave to everyone. Put your hand up if you worked on the film. Let's give them a hand.
They're a divided art department. The ship guys, the lab guys are over there.
What makes Ontario such a great place to make movies?
The crew, bar none. Those people that you're just clapped for. The carpenters, the painters, I think the grips, the electrics. The crew here has grown up for many years, and I've seen it, and the skill level is unparalleled.
Yeah, I've said this before, but when we started, say in the 80s, there were a lot of people coming through town, DPs, production designers, costume designers, and there were not a lot of locals who were getting the big projects, and these people, Tamara, Dennis, and a number of other people, observed them, were trained, and now, we have kind of, I think, risen to that level where, our infrastructure is really incredible, and there's no need for those people to come. We've got it all from top to bottom. That, and, there's a few different looks around here. There's some very good tax credits. There's a lot of local support. So I just think we've got the perfect kind of mix of everything. But really and truly, as Tamara says, and look, we feel lucky. We really feel like we've got the best crew. And we've been at it for a long time together. But it really is kind of magic, because you'll go other places and you'll work with other people and you go, you know what, that wasn't as good.
How do you feel, Dennis?
I'm just picking up on what Miles says. I think it's a whole ecosystem in Ontario and Toronto specifically, from education to the infrastructure to the facilities to the amazing crews. I mean, we have everything, and it's really at a point now where I think we're at the top of our game. I mean, I was humbled by the crew right up and down. So yeah, I think it's definitely the crews.
Yeah. Give yourself a round of applause, please. I know we have some time for some audience questions, so I wanted to sort of open the floor. We got some. I see a hand right there, right away. They're going to bring you a mic, so you can ask right into the mic.
No hardball stuff.
Okay. Does it work? Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. It's like a really inspiring talk, and we've been talking a lot about Frankenstein. And the issue I want to address now is the AI scare, because people are thinking AI and they're thinking like people are not doing actual work. Like you say, like it took like a ship 5 months to build, right? And people are just saying, oh, it's just like you press a button and the ship appears, something like this. And I was wondering, is like, what is your take on that? Like, should you, or should we like educate the audience, like talk about the filmmaking process, involve people into this, like with thinking, or what do you think in general about this?
I think Guillermo really said it quite acutely when he said "fuck AI" a couple weeks ago. So that's pretty unambiguous. Look, the crafts on this movie kind of speak for themselves, and it's not. In fact, you know what? I'm just going to read this because I got an email today to this from somebody who saw our movie, and I'm just going to read this because I meant to. I just finished watching Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, and I'm still thinking about it, not just the atmosphere or the craftsmanship, but the sheer intention behind every design decision. What really stopped me in my tracks was the wardrobe work of Mia Goth's characters, Claire and Elizabeth. There's a butterfly-inspired dress Elizabeth wears that is one of the most purposeful pieces of costume design I've seen in years. It's not beautiful by accident. It's beautiful because costume designer Kate Hawley and her team clearly obsessed over symbolism, silhouette, etc., etc. Those wings weren't just inspired by a butterfly in a surface way. They were engineered to echo fragility, danger, innocence, and theatricality all at once. Nothing arbitrary, nothing accidental, and this is where the conversation about AI and design gets real. AI can approximate and generate something that looks like an idea, but it can't create the deep intention behind that dress without a human designer guiding every decision. It doesn't understand metaphors, doesn't understand character, doesn't understand how fabric can make a viewer feel something before a single line of dialogue is spoken. The level of meaning requires a human point of view. That's how we all feel.
You know, and like to that point, you know, when we were doing like the cell, and we did, and Guillermo wanted this tiled nightmare, and to me, I started reading in the translucency of the creature's skin matching the translucency of the cell, and the segments of the tile speaking to the human body and segments of a spinal cord. And yeah, you don't get that with AI. That's pure human imagination. And we did not really, you know, AI is a tool. I just want to say that. It's there if you know how to use it. But everything we did came out of our own heads, and I speak for me and the entire art department that worked on this. You know, nobody was like, you know, we were handcrafting from computers, yes, but it's still human thought and human process.
And I promise you there wasn't a single moment where a button was pushed and something perfect happened. It just never happened. And in the case of, just to pick up on Miles' point with the butterflies that are wafting around, those are hand-animated, keyframe-animated butterflies. Those aren't AI butterflies, stuff like that. You know, it's still, you know, so we use computers, as Tamara said, we use computers as a tool, but they don't own us, we own them. Like we're, you know, the designers and the architects of our own art, right? So, yeah.
Let AI cure cancer. That'd be good.
More questions. I see one right in the middle there. Can we get a mic down to them?
Hello. So this relates to intentionality of design. In the main workshop area with the big Medusa, was that supposed to be Athena's shield? The Pallas Athena?
Yeah, I mean, there was that element to it because, you know, it's part of the whole mythology. There's actually there's Perseus fighting Medusa mosaic that's in tile work around the Medusa, which we faded and aged, but it's there, and we actually took it from an ancient mural that's on a ceiling of a building in Italy that you're not allowed to copy, but we did. So we actually sent them, we redid versions of it and sent them that. So, you know, there's actually Perseus with the shield with the Medusa on, you know, that the Medusa, turns the Medusa into stone. You know, Guillermo's whole thing with the Medusa was that she's this misunderstood monster. And so if you're steeped in Greek mythology, there's so many levels. You know, she was related to water, and this was a municipal water tower, and there's all kinds of sort of relevant symbolism with water and the Medusa. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much.
So we're waiting for Guillermo del Toro's Medusa. That's the next project, right?
Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? Am I missing anybody? Oh, one on the end here. Hold on, they'll get you a mic.
Thank you. Hi. You did talk about this, all of you, but I just wanted to know if you have like a specific. I know that working on set it's all of you like doing something, and you are obviously an A+++ team of incredible artists. But is there something that you all like think, if it wasn't for me and like what I know about myself, this understanding of the creature wouldn't have happened? I don't know if that makes sense. Like, is there anything that is entirely like you as a person that got seeped into the creation of the movie?
God, there's so many little bits of everybody's personality in this movie. You know, Guillermo wanted a moss squad. I'm just using this as an example. And I was like, what the hell's a moss squad, Guillermo? And he'd had one on Pan's Labyrinth. And I was like, okay, we'll make a moss squad. So it was me and the greens people and the scenic artists. And I got so into that, and I found deep personal meaning in the moss. And I started putting the moss in the creature cell with the guys and photographing it, taking back to set and showing Guillermo. And I was like, and it's like, you know, I didn't need to say this to Guillermo, but it's like nature and the creature, even though he's man-made, is so in tune with nature, and we're missing the point as people, and you know, so like the moss meant a lot to me, the moss squad, and like there's just that everywhere, I think.
There were also mushrooms, I believe, involved for you there.
Miles and Dennis, do you have anything to say on that question?
You know, it's just pouring yourself into it every day. I mean, this was so personal for Guillermo. Like, if you watch this movie 5 times, you'll pick up whole new things, very, very sort of, you know, deep metaphors and things that you didn't see the first 4 times. And it's really all him, and we're just soldiers with our oars in the water. Like, that's kind of the way I think of it, because everything was so intentional on his part. Like, I would say it's more that way for me on other films, but on this one, he knew every single thing, like every speck of paint, every piece of moss, everything, and how it all tied together. So I think more than anything on this film, it was really kind of it was all of us, but it was really all Guillermo, really.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you both said it. I mean, there are moments, like little things where you can do it, but he was like our single point of truth. You know, he's been thinking about this for 50 years, and he would just, like, you'd ask a question, he'd just play the moment back for you in his head. He already had the film kind of, you know, finished. I mean, I will say, if it was moss for you, it was probably mountains for me. So I obsessed over mountains a lot. So, yeah.
Any other audience questions?
April Fox, ladies and gentlemen.
April Fox.
Who worked on the feature, I found it personally hard pacing with just such a small thing that I was focusing on. How do you all find you pace yourself to last the full 2 years plus?
Coffee.
I haven't worked in a year. Purposefully. Still have PTSD.
No joke.
You know, here's my answer, April Fox. You surround yourself with extremely talented people from my end, and they support you and hold you up. And even when you feel like you just can't do it, somebody in your art department lifts you up, and they get it. And there's a communication and a camaraderie and a craftsmanship that just elevates me every day.
Miles, what about you, though?
Now the tears. You know, I don't know. It's I just don't really have the second speed, so I kind of have to keep going. There's only so many crosswords and shit to keep you busy if you're not doing this, so it's just kind of my DNA now. I just like doing it. I like being on set. I like being there in the heat of things, and I'll jump in a deprivation tank maybe for a couple weeks in January and then start again. But it's I kind of live for this shit.
You don't have time between all the award shows you have to go to.
Don't jinx it.
I want to know if you guys have any advice for folks that maybe are, early stage in their career, looking for the right collaborators. Obviously, you guys have found this family. What should people look for in terms of collaborators and teammates on this journey of making films?
I think people you can trust, people that make you feel good. Easy for me to say, but I would, at this point in my career, looking back, there are certain people I would never work with, that I would never, no
Names?
no names. Knowing what I know now, having found perfect collaboration, I think, you really it has to feel right, and you have to voice yourself. That's what I like.
But having said that, like you can't know that until you have some of those stinker experiences. So I think the thing is to just find your community. So, like CFC or a film school or those connections. And if you're a director, find a producer. And if you're a producer, find a director. Or if you're a cameraman, find a director. Like you got to find your community. And I think it's a big enough community here now that you can do that. There are ways to do that. Make a short. That's a great calling card. Just find a mentor. Like I can look back on the 4 or 5 mentors I've had in my career, most of them in my, 20s and 30s, where I really took things from them, and then you'll find your way into that community. And, as she says, find a group that you like to work with. So if you can get on as a, in an art department, if you can get on as an art department PA, or a coordinator, start there, observe, learn, ask questions, just be curious. That's the key to this whole thing. And it's a great time for that right now. You might move up a little more slowly than you used to, just because it's pretty saturated here. But if you get on with good people, you'll find your way.
Dennis, how do you feel?
I mean, for me, and in my business too at Mr.X, if I was to give any advice, not that you should take it, but if I'm just going to throw it out there, I would say specialization is really important. Like I think it's important to do one thing really well, master it, and then that becomes the thin edge of the wedge that you can push into, higher level work and maybe laterally expanding. So, we hire painters, we hire special modelers for hard surface and for organic. We hire people who could animate bipeds or quadrupeds specifically. So specialization, I think, is an important thing, and I think mastery of a certain area, you're going to be sought after, and then of course the trust relationships that Miles and Tamara are saying. So yeah, for me, it's like mastering a specific area and then building out from there. You know what I mean?
Beautiful. I just want to check and make sure we don't have any more audience questions before we wrap things up. Oh, we have another question from our first question asker.
Thank you. I just couldn't help it. I was wondering which kind of mythology you digged into when you were researching the history and the mythology of it, because from what I saw like the picture of Empress Sisi on her chair, like the portrait, like you have like official portrait, and I saw maybe some Prussian soldiers kind of thing from the German Romanticism, but this is the viewer's view, and I was wondering what you digged into. What was your inspiration for the movie?
I have to say, being in Scotland was very inspirational, and going to museums, and I was, steeping myself in the ship, going to the Cutty Stark, any ship I could get to. So for me, like the inspirations are just everything. There's very specific things, like there's a David Caspar Friedrich painting with an iceberg in it that Guillermo and I glommed onto and tried to replicate. And I would go and see the daguerreotypes in the National Portrait Gallery in Scotland and photograph them and share them with our props people and be inspired. So, research is so, it's not just research, it's reference, it's opening your world, and it's not just sitting on a computer if you can. I mean, we obviously do that as well, but I think going to museums and going and standing in front of buildings and traveling and seeing different actual real built ships and that kind of thing is really the basis for making a good movie.
Last call. Thank you guys so much for doing this panel. I think it's so meaningful for people to get to hear about the, making of a film. We see the end product. A lot of us work in the industry, but like just to hear your specific processes, it's very helpful. So please give these folks a big round of applause. If you want to see more about the making of the film, there's a great featurette on Netflix that's about the making of the film. Tamara, Dennis, Miles, they've all done lots of interviews. There's lots of stuff to dig into. You guys are so generous with sharing. So thank you so much. And thank you to the DGC for hosting this, for TIFF for allowing us to do this, and just thank you, Guillermo, for continuing to make amazing movies and hiring you folks because you really make the magic happen. So thank you so much.